And a very special welcome to another edition of Defo on 5. I'm Jeff DeForest along with Mike Lubie Lubitz. And I've often told this story about my early experiences in South Florida radio. This goes back over 40 years. And I worked with a gentleman named Ron Harrison. Now, Lubie knows the story. This was in the heyday of all news radio. I think we had 3 or 4 stations, AM radio stations in town, that were doing all news. And they actually allowed 3 minutes per sportscast, 8 times in morning drive and 8 times in afternoon drive. And I got my start hooking on at 940 wins doing the afternoon drive sportscast. I worked with a guy named Ron Harrison, so I often was asked to substitute in the morning. And the story goes, and it's legendary because this guy lived in Isla Mirada. He was a sportscaster in South Florida in the mid to late 70s through the mid to late 80s, I would venture to say. The king, the undisputed king of the live spot, Lubie. This guy could sell anything. And I know you didn't have a chance to meet the guy. I think he checked out before we started working together. But a real character's character. And he would drive up from Isla Mirada. Now, he had a little bit of a problem with alcohol, so it was always suspect whether or not he was going to make it. And he would make it invariably at the very last second. And this was in the days where he used to rip and read. Take the copy off the Associated Press or UPI wire and sort through it and then figure out what stories you were going to go with. Some guys took the time to actually create their own copy, but in Ron Harrison's case, he didn't have that kind of time and often would end up reading like a partial baseball score that was mixed in with the copy that he was handed as he ran through the door into the studio at the last second. Now, we all knew that he hadn't seen a game in centuries, and he would begin virtually every sportscast with the phrase, "Boy, what a game last night." And that was enough to get your attention. Now, then he would go on. I mean, the sportscast was kind of irrelevant to the fact that he was selling. This guy could sell anything. He was selling land in the North Carolina mountains in the 70s when there were no mountains in North Carolina. This guy make Eric Estrada look like a patsy when he was trying to sell those empty lots in the woods somewhere outside of Oaklawn Park in Arkansas. This guy was nothing compared to Harrison. But every sportscast began essentially with, "Boy, what a game last night." And you could have said, Lubie, I don't know, could you possibly have been happier or more thrilled with the results of the opening weekend of NCAA basketball? I mean, they say the tournament always delivers. I don't know what they could do to top the excitement, the thrill factor that was provided for the fans and the viewers on the opening couple of days of the tournament.
Well, especially down here. I mean, I did not see both FAU and UM getting to the Sweet 16. Like not only you got number ones going down, which again it only happened once in a first round.
Yep.
Number twos, number threes. You had some teams look dominant. You had Duke go out, which is always our dream before the Sweet 16. But then you had UM, which was highly questionable with Omer. Then playing like a monster. And then you had FAU, which was sort of the darling that everyone had forgotten about, played really well all weekend long. It as a South Floridian, we don't usually dominate college basketball, but we sort of did this weekend.
A circuitous route at the very least. UM looked horrible in its opening game, going against the Drake team that a lot of the wise guys thought was a real sleeper play to maybe even make some noise and go deeper into the tournament than certainly a lot of the favorites were ending up doing. And yet they were able, after a horrible game, I think at one point close to the end of the first half, I believe they were 5 for 25 from the field.
Yep.
They were shooting like 30% from the field for the game. Somehow, Jim Larinaga goes Rick Pitino in the middle of the ball game, realizing, man, we're getting clobbered here. We can't do anything right. Goes with full court pressure. I mean, I've said this for my entire lifetime. I don't know that there were many Jewish kids on the Drake team, but the Jewish kids in my neighborhood hated full court pressure. We could not operate against the press, and neither could Drake. And it got the Hurricanes back in the game, at least stemmed the tide long enough and gave them time to find a couple of guys, Nigel Pack being one, who could sink a shot. And the Hurricanes literally, I mean, you talk about Jim Larinaga and the slogan survive and move on. They survived and moved on. And yet, off that performance, you would have given them little chance of resurrecting themselves to what was their midseason form and coming back and shellacking Indiana in the end game with a big run at the end of the ball game. And Jim Larinaga said he thought it was never in doubt that the Canes were playing their game and that they were going to be able to handle Indiana, even though Indiana made it more than tension filled at different times in the second half. as they opened up with a haymaker, scored the first 7 points of the second half, and ended up taking a lead in that ball game. And then the Hurricanes managed, after teetering back and forth, to pull the thing out and won the game in style and going away by 16 points. And then you look at FAU. I mean, they all looked ready to be knocked out. The FAU team looked like it was ready to just go up in smoke if they faced Purdue in the second round. And what happens? One of the great upsets, I guess one of two great upsets of all time in NCAA tournament history, as Fairleigh Dickinson University at 20-1 on the money line goes out and knocks off Purdue in the first round of the tournament, and then becomes the opponent for FAU. And Dusty May finds himself in a pretty sweet spot. They were heavily favored over Fairleigh Dickinson, who gave him a battle. I mean, you talk about tenacious. This was the Lilliputians going against, the Giants in Brobdingnag, and just unbelievable. They're the shortest team, height-wise, in the tournament, Fairleigh Dickinson, out of New Jersey. And after providing that sensational, stunning first-round upset, they end up losing to FAU after giving them a little bit of a tussle through about, the first 33, 34 minutes of the game, back and forth. And then finally, FAU spurted at the end and ended up winning the ball game, and now find themselves in the Sweet 16, going to Madison Square Garden to take on Tennessee, Lubie, which Tennessee surprised me by beating Duke. They really did. They had a lousy first game, and were barely able to survive that. And now they come off the win against Duke, which was a team that a lot of people thought was a hot commodity going into the tournament. And so Tennessee and FAU, kind of a, obviously every game that FAU had in the tournament so far would have been an upset had they faced Purdue, but sort of an easy path. You don't have to beat everybody to be the champion. That's the beauty of the NCAA tournament. You just have to, as Jim Larinaga would point out and everybody else would use as the cliche, survive and move on and beat the team that's in front of you in the next episode. Not an easy assignment for Miami, although they're not playing as well as you would think. Houston, a number one seed, is next up for Miami in Kansas City, Missouri. What do you think? I mean, I'm watching Houston. They seemed vulnerable, although they did in the second half rally and pull away and win handsomely in their second game. But they looked vulnerable at different times. They were, I think, in a dead heat at halftime to a number 16 seed in the first game of the tournament. So I don't know. I mean, it's great to see. This is not a college basketball town. Now, all of a sudden, it's kind of like when the Marlins would make the World Series, and all of a sudden, all the news anchors were out there in front of the stadium talking as if they knew Miggy Rojas personally. And they're wow, look at this. This is great. This is unbelievable. Meanwhile, they hadn't mentioned the team the entire year. I don't know that was the case. They did a decent job of covering these two teams, local news channels, during the course of the season, but certainly made for a great story. What was your favorite aspect of the tournament so far, besides the local teams? You had to love Furman and their victory over Virginia. That was great. They were only 5.5-point underdogs, but Furman, as we say, bad cop, good team.
Yes.
Couldn't make it into the Sweet 16. And Princeton, after beating Arizona, a number 2 seed, actually comes back and hammers its next opponent and also finds themselves in the Sweet 16. But what was the most entertaining part of it for you, Mike Lubie Lubitz?
It was the fact that every year we are so sure that either people are sure of the upset, and those are the upsets they were wrong on. That's why the Drake thing. Look, I almost got proven wrong, but in the end, UM did win by 7, and they covered. So I felt confident about my pick, and Omier playing definitely helped there. But the upsets people assume are going to happen don't. And then the upsets that you could never imagine. Zach Edey, player of the year, playing this tiny team. They looked so bad. Like Purdue at the end of that game was so bad. Like I was rooting them on because it was like I have them, I think, in the 4s in our bracket that we're in. So I'm rooting them on, and I'm like, this is like the end of the game. They did not look like the number 1 seed. They looked like the 16 seed, and it was a total like Fairleigh Dickinson looked like the team that everyone had been touting all year. They were confident. They were burying shots. And Purdue couldn't even keep a possession going. It was really weird to watch that game. And it's so funny that all year long, and that UCLA years ago at Tyus Sedney, after that game versus, I guess it was Missouri, they went on and were a monster. But you see them early on finding their sea legs, and they can get bit. And to watch Arizona go down when Arizona and Purdue were two teams that a lot of people thought would win it all, or at least be in the Final Four, to go down in the first, not only the first weekend, the first 2 nights of action
Yeah,
was freaking
Kansas too
weird.
knocked down at a tournament.
Weird.
What was weird about that? Gene Katie had to be rolling over in his grave. Is he dead, Katie? I think he checked out.
He passed, yes.
Probably had the weirdest hair of anybody. It kind of looked like he got the hairpiece from the set of a Peter Lorre film, a horror film. Because I mean, it was really strange, wasn't it? Didn't it look like he had taken some kind of black paint and just spray painted his head, Gene Katie, when he
So
was
we did
coaching
it
Purdue?
again. It says he's alive. He's 80.
Oh yeah, okay. There's another guy we killed off. Anyway, he had to be just absolutely beside himself watching. Zach Edey, 7'4", against the shortest team in the NCAA, doesn't touch the ball barely at all in the last 10 minutes. How do you not get a timeout? Now, it wasn't like he was being so blanketly well covered, because I saw him on the inside. He had position a zillion times. Guy would look at him, not throw the ball into the low post. Even if he just tossed it in there, any of the Purdue players and gotten it into Edey, they would have been wide open for a shot if he sent it back out. And certainly Edey would have had his way inside, you would have to think, because the guy is pretty adept at the hook shot from either side.
Yeah, he's not Denny Chase. Like he actually
No, this guy's all right. And he doesn't touch the ball in the last 10 minutes of the ball game. I don't know how a coach couldn't be screaming, absolutely going nuts, ape shit at his team and saying, get the ball inside to the big man. It didn't happen. And so Purdue went down to Fairleigh Dickinson. Dusty May, who's going to be a hotter commodity? I guess Rick Pitino was already offered the St. John's job. That happened yesterday, and he's going to decide whether he takes it. And I'm thinking, what do you say, Lubie? Should we think for Rick Pitino? It does seem like this would be the ideal way for him to go out the door if he was looking for one more shot to be in a Division I level with a school that would be, at least possible to develop into a long-term power, that he would take that St. John's job. Obviously, he can recruit the New York area very well. He lives there now in Mamaroneck off one of the fabled golf courses there, Wingfoot, and doesn't want to leave the area. So I think he either stays at Iona, which is what he said, or takes a St. John's job. I'm going to go St. John's.
Yeah.
He will be wearing a Luke Harnaseca sweater to the press conference, no?
Iona's hit their limit. I mean, they were horrendous. Like, they had no shot in their game, and it's fine. I mean, they were the underseeded team, but he's hit his peak with him. If he wants to keep coaching basketball, he's doing it there.
All right, Furman over Virginia, Princeton over Arizona, Fairleigh Dickinson. It's all Florida in this Sweet 16 over Purdue, the great games. Omier looked like Wes Unseld in this game yesterday, did he not?
He was very sure.
6'7", grabbed every rebound. He literally stuffed the air out of the ball on a few of them. I mean, these were hotly contested rebounds against an Indiana team that had a very good season under Mike Woodson, who I didn't even know was still alive either, although he always manages to land coaching jobs. He's done a nice job at Indiana, and we're reliant almost totally on this guy. I mean, just being a monster on the boards. In terms of any kind of rebounding advantage they would have. And Omier was all of that. Then running the floor on top of that. What did they do? You talk about a miracle cure. Did Jim Larinaga take Norshad Omier out to some frozen lake somewhere in Albany? It was cold weather. Only a Benny Hinn revival could have cured a guy like that. That was amazing. I mean, he was as agile and active as you could possibly be, showed no signs of any kind of injury to the ankle. And so our good friend Tony Segretto's information turned out to be good. And he ended up playing and was a major difference maker in that ball game where, once again, I mean, you finally found the Hurricanes in their rhythm where everybody contributed, which was really, really nice. A couple of other things happening over the weekend. And the tournament, of course, picks up again, I believe. FAU and Miami will play Thursday and Friday.
That was annoying yesterday. It did suck that those two played 30 minutes apart. Like, it was really annoying to have to both those. And I know they don't care about South Florida, and year in, year out, when you look at the numbers, it ranks as like bottom 5. But you can't tell me with those two teams in it that South Florida wasn't watching it more. It was just weird. It was annoying. You had all day. Like, why not put one on the earlier times, one on the, like, it was annoying to me. Have to monitor.
Yeah, that was unfortunate. Although, I managed to catch enough of both games. Went with the elongated. It seems like halftime takes forever, doesn't it?
Yes,
When they have a
yes.
game at the half, like you go outside, you walk the dog, you go for your 4 mile jog, you come back, and it's still at the half. There's Barkley on TV breaking down the ball game for you, which people still enjoy that halftime show with Barkley, and at the same time, you could tell that he hasn't seen a game
Not college basketball, yeah.
the entire season. On the women's side, Stanford, a number one, goes out. A number one seed goes out. Looks like South Carolina is just going to blow everybody apart. You still have the University of Miami oddly playing Indiana, and that game takes place today. University of Miami women are still alive in the tournament, and Florida Gulf Coast, their women's team is still alive. Although I believe I know Miami only played one game. I think Florida Gulf Coast only played one game because they were playing Saturday and now Monday. I guess not to conflict, since outside of Jim Sarney, nobody was going to be watching. I'm sorry, Jim,
Ah,
but nobody was going to be watching the women's tournament with the excitement that was being produced in the men's game. And the World Baseball Classic, USA 14, Cuba 2. A lot of protests out there, people screaming, and going crazy because the Cuban baseball team was here in town at Lone Shark Park. Turned out to be a dud of a game. The big debate will be, is it worth it for these major league players to play in the World Baseball Classic? Now, if you're an owner of a team, a general manager, and you see Edwin Diaz out for the season for the Mets,
nope.
a key component in all of the rise for hope that they had to make it into not only a postseason position, but maybe a World Series run and win a championship finally. We haven't had that feeling here since what, 1969? I guess it was 86 was their last
Yeah.
championship. But other than that, few and far between for the Mets. They were primed to do that. They lose Diaz. That doesn't help them any. And then Jose Altuve goes out for a couple of months now with a broken thumb for the Houston Astros. Yankee fans probably happy about that in a Philadelphia Eagles fan type of spirit. Watching like Michael Irvin with a chalk outline in the middle of the field and they're cheering, yeah, all right, way to go, Mike. That's great. By the way, that video does seem to vindicate Michael Irvin, doesn't it? About
I
the
know they were.
sexual assault. I mean, he barely even talks to the woman. He grabs her arm for a second, just like, you would do with anybody you were saying goodbye to. And all of a sudden, he's sexually assaulting a woman. I don't know. That was one case where the video actually served a positive purpose. Usually it's just the opposite, right? You see the guy trampling a woman as he's taking her out of the elevator, as with the case with Ray Rice, or you see punches being thrown or crazy stuff, guns being drawn. But anyway, the issue is, whether or not these guys should play, and yet the players say they would never give it up, the opportunity to play in a World Baseball
Supposedly, it's a
Classic.
big deal to the players.
Yeah.
Some of the countries have lied to themselves and wanted to make it seem like it's not a big deal. I haven't watched 1 minute of it. I haven't cared about it at all.
Yeah.
It's not the World Cup. It's not the equivalent of the baseball version of the World Cup. It's not anything of that nature. Major League ball clubs don't want their guys there. Major League Baseball fans don't want their guys from their baseball team there. It's fine. I guess the players themselves have made it bigger than I think it is. So good for them that they're trying to bring some light to the world of baseball. I'm telling you right now, once I saw the Edwin Diaz thing, I was like, we're not as Marlins intensive as the Met fans are, but
Yeah.
I was like, thank goodness.
Oh, devastating.
I not go. I can tell you that right now.
My friend Ira, the Met fan, he couldn't even come out of the house for 3 days until he finally let that sink in that all hopes have already been dashed because of the World Baseball Classic. Interesting to see large crowds just swelling
That's true.
around the stadium there, as you know that we're not quite to opening day yet, but by the middle of April, you'll be hard pressed to find the fans outnumbering the vendors in the stands.
Oh, 100%. Yep.
At Lone Shark Park. All right. A lot of stuff to talk about. It's going to be a great week. So stick with us here on Defo on 5, here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, catch our show. Cranks up at 7 o'clock in the morning. 7 to 9 is a live version on South Florida Live. That's our YouTube channel. You can catch that, and also catch Mike Mayo's Lunchbox there, but we won't be featuring that today as Mike Mayo is gallivanting somewhere in the Keys. All right, we'll see you next time on Defo on 5. For Mike Lubie Lubitz, I'm Jeff DeForest. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow on the next edition of Defo on 5.